Hey, what up, guys? I'm running a little bit late, so my stream is a few minutes behind. Trying to get a few things set up real quick. Um, so we'll get started probably in the next few minutes. So anybody who join in, yeah, we'll get started in a few minutes, guys. Mm. All right, need to do one more thing and then we'll get started. Let's see. We'll get started in probably another minute or two, guys. Another minute or two, then we'll get started with the live stream. Um, let's see. We'll get started in a minute, guys. I'm trying to get a few things set up. Started a little bit late today, so give me about a minute, and then we'll get started with the live stream. All right, guys, let's get started. What up? What up? What up? I am Lou. Hopefully, y'all doing good today on this Friday day. I feel good, man. Been actually was kind of busy today, more busier than I anticipated. Um, I had an issue today. One of my processes. We end up. It's one of those deals where the logic that I implemented in this process. Um, so not to go too details. One of my a process for one of my clients that I'm managing. We have certain steps. We have a job and it has a few steps, right? Step 1, 2, and 3, and it does all kinds of different things. Step 1, for example, it calls an API, gets the data back from the API, then loads it to a database, for example. Step 2, it's executing a procedure. Step 3, executing some other procedure, applying certain business rules, things of that nature. Either way, it got to a point where one of the steps, I added some logic to accommodate this scenario that we never anticipated for. So added the logic, tested it out, it worked fine. The logic actually was right. The problem came to be when the job ran after, like over and over again, because it runs multiple times. Whenever there's certain order that we get over and over again because of updates, right? There's updated information on the order. On those scenarios when we're getting it over and over again, because that new piece of logic that I added, I put it, let's say for example, in step 5. So what happens though was it was actually I don't know how to explain it. Not try to go. I don't want to go too much in the weeds, but ultimately that logic that I added should have added to step 7, not step 5. Because I added to step 5, it was actually duplicating one of my aggregations, a process where it's aggregating some totals, but it was duplicating that value, and that was causing issues. And the reason why I was doing that is because I have a process where I do like some kind of consolidation. Well, in order to consolidate, it needs to determine which orders belong together. Again, we have business rules and logic for that. Based on that logic, if it's able to identify, oh, these orders, they all belong together, so let's put them all together in the queue so we can reprocess them. Sometimes when we get orders that come in, we're only getting orders. Like for example, let's say there may be 10 orders that need to be all consolidated. Well, we may only get one order that got retransmitted to the API, but we need to reconsolidate all 10 if we're going to resubmit this data back to another system to have everything to be allocated properly. Well, what happened in these cases is, so that I have a process where it's pretty much identifying, all right, find the previous order that we received, put them back in the queue, and then if we have new ones back in the queue, there's a duplication process that occurs to kind of remove, like keep the newest record and discard the old record, right, type deal. So in that process, what was happening is we had double records, but before the process ran to remove the dupes, right, to keep the newer one and remove the older version, some aggregation, some new logic that I added to aggregate was running on step 5, but it should have ran step 7. Either way, causing big issue. Man, I had to deal with that today. Identify the issue and but part of the process, right? It's just one of those deals where the logic was right, and when we did a few testing over it, because we were testing it manually, like putting orders back in the queue manually and rerunning the process to test it, and it was successful. We just didn't accommodate that logic where we're putting old orders back in the queue as well. Whenever we need to reconsolidate everything back together again. Either way, man, I spent way more time than what I should have on that process. It is what it is. But man, so today, again, drinking with Lou, I'm gonna be drinking this tequila called Sauvignon. How do you pronounce this? I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. Sauvignon. I know I'm not pronouncing it right, and I should pronounce it right. But this is the bottle that I'm gonna be drinking. It's not cheap, I could tell you that right now. So this This is a what's considered premium tequila. I did hear some good things about it from from the reviews, a good rating as well. So there's a lot of good things I heard about it, but again, 44, I mean $45 pretty much, 44.95 or whatever. That's not cheap, man. That's it's not a cheap bottle, but I'm gonna taste it and see how good it is. Hey, what's up, Python developer? How you doing, man? Thanks for joining live stream. How's your day going so far? Damn, I can't open this. Let me grab my. There it goes. Got it open. Yeah, we'll go through some of these processes. So we'll go through the. So you mentioned you want to look at AppFlow. So we'll play around with that. Let me open up your email right quick. I saw that you sent an email, but let me reopen it up. I had to reboot my machine, so I need to start my reopen up email real quick. Let's see. Okay, so see your email. So you talked about another solution apart from Python, Visual Clones to connect to Sharepoint S3 and Bucket. We'll take a look at a few options, but I think that's going to be kind of tough. And the reason why I say that is I looked into Power Automate for Microsoft, and they do have a feature when it comes to Sharepoint, but they don't have a feature when it comes to uploading to S3. So that's one of the issues, right? And I think that's some of the issues we're gonna find as well with certain tools, certain other applications, where they may have a connection for one, but they lack a connection for the other. There's another software that we'll take a look at. What is it called? Zapper, I believe I think that's what it's called. So they have a lot of connectors for different applications to kind of build a workflow, right? To like pull data, connect here, do this and do that. We'll take a look at that. It's been a while since I used it. I have used it before, but it's been a while. I'm not sure if they have one for S3, but again, we'll take a look at it, see what we could find on that when it comes to that piece. Let me see. You asked about AWS storage service, like files uploaded to server should be reflected in S3 bucket also automatically. Not sure exactly what you mean by that. Files uploaded to server. I'm assuming you mean. I know in Visual Clones we created a job where we kind of had we had the job download file from SharePoint, then save it on the server, and then upload those files to S3 bucket. So I don't know. I'm assuming that's you mean that whatever on the whatever we download and save on the server, that those files should ultimately reflect what's in S3. And if that's the case, that's not an issue at all. But let's go ahead and let's take a look at AppFlow. So let me log in right quick under my I think for this I'll log in under my account that I created for streaming, and I think it should be fine to show whatever I need to show. So let me go ahead and get logged in. Let's see. All right, while that's opening up, let me go ahead and open up this bottle. So let's see how good this tequila tastes. I'm hoping that it tastes good because, again, it's not a cheap bottle. I did hear some good things about it, but again, it's it's like anything, right? It's very subjective. Um, man, this is on there tight. There it goes. Damn, that was in there real tight. All right, I'm logged in now. But before that, let me give it a smell test. It does have a strong smell, but I smell a lot of alcohol as well too. Not, I like smelling more of the agave smell, which I can smell some of it, but I do smell more alcohol. Dude, this is good. I gotta say, man, that is smooth. That's some smooth tequila. Dude, that's good. I'm gonna say, man, that is good. I wish it had a more of the agave smell, but you could smell it some. But the taste has a real good taste, and it goes down real smooth. Dude, I like it. That's a good tequila. That's a keeper for sure. That I will buy again. It is a bit on the pricey side. Again, $44. I wish it was more like $40. At least, 38, but still, that's not bad. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Just kind of walk through this process a little bit. So let's take a look at. Let's take a look at app flows. So let's see what kind of connections they have here. Get started. All right. I guess we'll see a list of what's available. So let's go ahead and create a flow. And let's take a look at it. Connector source destination. Configure flow. Blah, blah, blah. Let me see. Choose the object that you want to transfer from your favorite application. Specify when and where to transfer it to. So let's just call this. Who knows if we can even do it? I'm not sure we can, but let's just call it Sharepoint to S3. That's fine. No tags. Hit next. Let's see. All right, so let's see what do we have that's available here. So this is cool. This Infor Nexus. I do integration with them today. We do EDI integration with them. What else? What do they have? So let's do a search. Let's see. Nope. There's no SharePoint. Nope. No Microsoft. So probably should look at a list of what's available, because right now I'm looking at the list and it is a small list of what you're able to connect to. Obviously they have S3 buckets, which makes sense. But when you look at external connections, you got SAP, Salesforce. These are big platforms. ServiceNow is another big platform. Slack. But it's very limited, man. Like, there's not a lot here. Let me go back to our two flows. Let's see if we could take a look at a list of. Let's look at the documentation. I want to see we're able to see a list of what flows are available. Let's see. Supported application. There we go. So S3, Redshift. And these are all Amazon. Let's look at non-Amazon platforms. So it's a select list of connectors that they have. I mean, they got some of your big applications. Again, Salesforce, probably for CRM data, SAP, operational data, sales data, stuff like that. Datadog, that would be like your security, activity data on your servers and things of that nature. Again, Google Analytics for your website. Infor Nexus, they do carrier tracking, which is kind of interesting. I didn't realize they are a big customer, a big provider. Let's see. No SharePoint. Yeah, no, there's no Microsoft anything, right? Microsoft being as big as they are, but it kind of makes sense, I think, because AWS is rivaled with Amazon, so for them to go out of their way and I guess integrate their products, they're probably not going to do that either. But do you have SAP Salesforce data? Let me check real quick. I know I had anyways. I don't know if I still have it, but let me check. I had a Salesforce sandbox environment, but let me see if I can find the credentials for that, or the URL and all of that. Let's see. I know I got an email the other day and it was like, yeah, you need to reactivate it or something. So I just got a message through my email. It wants a verification code. So let me type that in. Damn, it wants me to change my password. Let me do that real quick. Hold on. Okay. No, you know what? Damn it. Okay, so I did have a development environment, but it expired, and now they're asking me to pay if I want to continue to use it. So that's not gonna work. Okay, it's fine. Let's see what else. I don't have any SAP data. Again, I had Salesforce initially. Trying to think, why did I get Salesforce? I think I was playing around with it on looking at some of their API information. I think that's what it was initially. But that was a couple of months back, and I guess I thought it was a sandbox environment, like permanent, but I guess not. It must have been a trial sandbox environment where now they're saying for me to continue to use it, I got to pay for it, which I'm not going to do. But yeah, it seems like there is connectors for that using AppFlow to show how AppFlow works. Yeah, I can't. We could try to use something else. Let's see what else they have. So let's go to create flow. They just do, I'm going to call this I am Lou test. All right. So let's see what we do have. Just kind of be able to at least look at it. I don't have none of these platforms, but what do I have, I guess? I mean, the only thing I have here than S3, we could look into that. This is just specifying the bucket, YouTube storage, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, what do I have? Do I even have a file in there? Staging. There we go, though. You got some data in there. So let's just take a look at that. Formats. And then for destination. Okay, so when it comes to destination, it seems like, again, it's a limited list. But ultimately, the list, Redshift, which makes perfect sense, right? If you're taking data from like CRM from Salesforce, that could easily get migrated into a Redshift data warehouse, or it could get moved to an S3 bucket. I don't think I have a Redshift set up on this environment, but I do. I mean, I guess we could look at moving it to a different bucket in S3 real quick. So let me go back to S3, create bucket. What did I call my other bucket? There it goes. YouTube storage, blah, blah, blah. YouTube storage 111012. Let's call it that. It has to be unique, so hopefully that should be unique enough. Create bucket. So let's say we're going to just move those files to another S3 bucket, right? Do I need to hit refresh? There it goes. Which is this guy. So JSON format. So moving everything over as a JSON format. What else? Which that really doesn't matter much unless you prefer CSV, but in this case, it shouldn't really matter. Run on demand, run flow on schedule. On demand is fine. Your URL path. So it seems, I'm wondering, I guess let's run it. Let me go ahead and hit next. Oh, my bad. So I need to add some. So what was this? Was it staging? Staging. Yep, staging. And then of course you're gonna get the files from a staging. If we're dealing with another subfolder, then of course it'll be like 2022, whatever it is, right? In our case, it's only staging. That should be fine. And here, so it gave my name. I need to give it a prefix. So I'm gonna call this. Let's see if I move it to another bucket. Staging. I'm not sure why. I don't want that. I'm not sure why it's doing that. I guess that's fine for now, but yeah, I really don't like that though. Either way, let's kind of move on. Then source from destination to field mapping. So this is showing map all fields directly, but you could tell these are all the columns that belong in that field. I'm just going to do map all fields, right? So we see the mapping down below. if we were doing this to Redshift, my guess it would be something similar to this as well, and probably you should be able to change it. So kind of give an example. If I click on scripts, modify value, let's see, mask value, truncate text value. All text values are truncated by the number of characters. Nope. So those, I think those are the only options that it gives us, or remove it. So let's say I'm gonna pick scripts for now for yeah. But I guess let's say we're dealing with like doctor names and you don't want to display the doctor names for whatever reason. That will probably be a good option where you could do a mask all values, or mask first number of character, the last number of character. In this case, it's gonna be all values, and that should be fine. What else do they have? I should have looked at what else. Is that it? So it seems very limited that what you could do. You could do. Oh shit, my bad. Damn it. Okay, I just realized I wasn't sharing my screen. So let me go back. So ultimately what I did, my source is the Amazon S3 bucket. I'm specifying the path. Again, if I go to my bucket and here's my folder, this is where all my files are at. So that's kind of what I did here. You know, select the bucket and then specify the path. Well, what I mentioned as well was if you're dealing with another subfolder, like let's say with year, for example, you could do / year, right? And you'll see it show up over here. That's the path. So it just depends on where your files are at. In this case, we're reading CSV files, so it only takes two formats, which makes sense: CSV or JSON. We're dealing with CSV, so that's fine. We're moving it to this other S3 bucket. It's a different one, right? This one is 10045. This is 111012, and I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna have it create a new subfolder and drop it in there. Now there is options. If we look at destination, oh my bad, destination. The options is Redshift is an option, which is probably one of those most likely scenarios to do. So looking at this, like I'm looking at this to try to figure out what is different from this, or compared to, let's say, AWS Glue when it comes to moving data from S3 to Redshift. And based on what I'm seeing, this will probably be a more the process seems like it'd probably be faster. I don't know how much flexibility you have though, when it comes to if you're trying to do any kind of transformation in your data set. If it's a clean load where you're just taking data from S3 bucket and load it to Redshift, for example, I think this is probably the clean way to do it. It's going to be a simple way to do it. But my guess, you're probably going to be limited as well on certain features of what you could do. And the reason why I say that is whenever I'm clicked on S3, I'm going to move it to another S3 bucket, which is fine. Right, hit next. There's a manual mapped fields. So the way this works is it's actually going to scan through my file. So if as you could tell, these are all the fields that exist in that CSV file. So all of these guys here, right? So if I click on map all fields directly, oops. Why is it? Oh, there it goes. Okay. If we look down below, these are all the fields that we're dealing with, right? So there's a good amount of columns. So let's say we're dealing with one of the things that I noticed that we could do, and a good example would be like I have dealt with a lot of healthcare data, and one of the things is customer information. You know, there's a big, you know, there's a file they call PDRP. Ultimately, it's a prescriber mask list that prescribers have registered to say, hey, if I'm part of I want to register and I want to be excluded. My name should not be included in any reports or anything that's published being distributed out. Like in this case, it would be for like salespeople. So what you have to do in those cases, you have to mask their names. So like a good example, if I go to prescriber name, which is probably this guy, prescriber, I believe, they do have a modified value, but it only has two options, literally mask value, which is cool for that scenario. And then of course you could truncate text value. This is, again, if you're dealing with a long text, but you want to minimize it down. A good example for this would be you're dealing with a 9-digit zip code, but maybe you just want the first 5 digits only. Then this will be an opportunity to truncate that. But you could tell that's all it has, man. It's very limited what you could do. It's not giving you all other options when it comes to transformation. So it's very limited what you could do. Part of that could be because this is a new service. Anytime Amazon comes out with something new, they're giving you the core features of it and it's basic. And eventually they should add on to it and hopefully add on more features. But as of right now, that's kind of what so just kind of keep that in mind. What does the validation say? Add validation to your data fields and specify what actions to take if invalid data is found. So we'll skip that for now, but it sounds like you could add some kind of logic to that. Okay, so now that it's mapped from here to here, and keep in mind it's going to convert it to a JSON file, not a CSV. So, which is fine because, I mean, I say it's fine, but normally if you're going to consume data from an S3 to Redshift or whatever, CSV works perfectly fine for that. So let me hit next. You could add filtering. Add filters to your data fields. Will transfer only record that meet this criteria. All right, so that's cool. But where is the filters? I don't see. Like, where do you add it? It doesn't show nothing. Let's see. Because our company data is in Sharepoint private group, how to automate that to S3 if it's private group. So let's just kind of talk about different scenarios. Let's say if you're like in the video that I have made that relates to Sharepoint, where I'm using Python code to download and then upload a S3. So in that scenario, that user account that I'm using, the same logic applies to a company. Whatever user is going to log into Sharepoint through the API to be able to access it and download it, that user account needs to have access to a private Sharepoint. So that's really number one. Like, it doesn't matter, even if you're using some kind of tool, like the tool like Visual Crohn's that we use, and you know that tool has a connection to be able to connect to Sharepoint and download files. Even if you're using something like that, whatever user account that you're using, that user has to have access to that private Sharepoint account. Because if it doesn't, I mean, it just can't connect to it. Now, the way you kind of work around it, it's probably a few options. One option would be have IT to create a profile, like a new account, right? Maybe it's called, I don't know, like automation at whatever your domain.com is, right? That, you know, it's just a new user, new email account pretty much, but it's relates to automating your job. And then what IT could do is they could narrow down the access that new account has. Like that new account will not have access to this service or this service or this service, but it could be given access to, let's say, Sharepoint, on that specific side of Sharepoint that you want to have access to. Which means, because it's being limited to what it could do, it's not like you could just go wild as well and just start accessing everything, but it would only access on what you give it. You know, in this case, it could be, you know, let's say, you know, access to Sharepoint to be able to download files and all of that. So that's number one. Number two would be in Azure. This would have to be done in Microsoft Azure, because again, Office 365 is using Azure when it comes to the Active Directory to manage all the users. unless you're working on-prem. But I'm assuming nowadays that most people are using Office 365. So either way, it's using Azure to manage Active Directory, like corporate after Active Directory. Um, there's an option as well. I would have to play around with it. I haven't tried it, but ultimately what you do is you're kind of creating. You're not creating a user. What you're doing, you're creating like an app in Azure as a security user, I guess you could say. And that app would have API, secret key, and tokens. And then ultimately, same concept. You give that app access to X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. And then based on those accesses, then of course you got to use those APIs to connect to it, and then you'll be able to access it that way. Is it not possible by any AWS service? I don't think so, man. That's the thing about it. I don't think there is. Not from AWS because like the only one like what we just saw right now, which is um AppFlow, there is no connection at all for um for SharePoint. It just does not exist. All of the connectors are for SAP and Salesforce and things of that nature. Um, but there and the thing about it is that you're really not going to find that kind of stuff. Like I think this app flow, it's something new that Amazon created, and it's cool. But I think when it comes to those kind of connections, you're gonna have to either find a third party provider that has it or buy a software. Again, kind of like doesn't have to be visual crones, but something similar to that that has these all of that built in. And then of course you kind of build your own connectors and so on, like your own settings to be able to connect to it and do what you wanted to do. Kind of like the way we did with visual crones. Like again, there's other platforms besides the visual crones. Like I have used some other ones. One of them called Robotask, which is cheap, but I don't think it does SharePoint connections though. That's the thing about it, right? It does other stuff that you could do in visual crones, but it doesn't do SharePoint connection. So you will have to just find one if SharePoint's very big. What we could do is let's take a look at real quick on Zapper. So they're pretty big. They have They have like thousands of connectors here that you connect to different. There you go, over 4,000 apps. So this is like very very similar to what Amazon is doing with app flows. As you could tell though, with app flows is very limited. Like it's a small list of applications. This is a bigger list. So let me go ahead and log in real quick. And then we could take a look at let me see. Yeah, I haven't used it in a while. I used it a while back because I was using it for this project. But it's been a while since I have used it. So let's take a look at this guy. Again, this is very similar to Amazon. This is a third-party app, different app, right? You got to pay for it. It's not expensive though. The cost of this is very reasonable if it's something that works. But let's just see what we have. Let's see if it even works, because I'm not sure that this would even work. So let's search for apps. SharePoint. Nope, no SharePoint. Oops. So when it comes to Microsoft, it only has really 3 Microsoft connectors: Teams, To Do, Excel, and Outlook, but nothing related to SharePoint. I'm assuming maybe there's an S3 connector. So there's an S3. Let's see what S3 does. So this is what recommended, but that doesn't really show everything. but it seems like it does have a connector to be able to connect to S3 and drop files. But again, the problem that we have here is there is no connector when it comes to SharePoint. So you're kind of stuck on that aspect of it. Like, all right, you know, these apps have connectors to S3, but they don't have connectors to SharePoint. And that's like one of the key things that you need, right? The connector to SharePoint, which this doesn't have. AppFlows doesn't have either. We could take a look at Power Automate and see what they have. So let me try connecting to that real quick. There goes Power Automate. Can we use Power Automate for SharePoint S3? Yeah, that's what I'm about to check right now. So I'm logging in to my to the account that I have. I think I have one job set up right now that runs. So let me go ahead and show. Okay, so let's search for so I'm pretty sure for SharePoint, again, they're gonna be connectors for that here because again it is a Microsoft product. So to me that makes sense. So what do we have here? When a file is deleted, when a file is created, when an item is created. So for sure you would have probably more flexibility here when it comes to triggers, right? Like let's say if the file gets updated, right? You know, or a new file gets dropped in SharePoint, then of course you could build a trigger to do something with it. But let's see what we're able to do in these cases. Move documents between SharePoint. No, send as an email. Send an email when a new item is created. Save email attachments. Notify. So let's see if there happens to be a connector for S3 in here. So there you go, copy files between Box and SharePoint. So I mean that is a third-party app. But let's see if they have something for S3. Okay, Amazon S3. All right, so that's cool. There's an S3, which is a premium connector. What does it do though? When an S3 object is updated, it starts an event. So that's the downfall, right? There is an action item for S3, but it's only to do one thing, which in this case happens to be when a file is dropped into S3, then you could have it do something, right? It's not, and I did that. I mean, yeah, it's. I don't see anything. Let me do something. Let me just do a quick check. Microsoft Power Automate SharePoint files to S3. I'm trying to see if there's even an option to do this. Right now, the only thing I see is have a trigger go off when a file happens to be updated in SharePoint. I mean, in so there is nothing that I'm able to see for now that it actually exists that does that. Let's look at the documentations real quick, but I believe it's only for that. Known limits. The operation to get content of an S3 object will work within the following limits. Object size must be less than 3.5 megabytes. Create a connection. So the actions, all it does is list S3 bucket, list objects, gets metadata, and gets content. I don't see nothing on here when it comes to being able to load data. Right? It's list objects, and of course you got your trigger. S3 buckets, collection, metadata. Yeah, so there is nothing here that I'm able to see for Power Automate. So again, it's one of those deals that's kind of tough, right? Because Amazon AppFlow works well for stuff in S3 bucket, move things around, upload, move files, like if you're pulling files, but there's no connector from SharePoint. So that's the piece that's missing. Zapper over here has ability to move files to S3, which is good. That means there's a connector, but there's no SharePoint here, right? If I search for SharePoint, there is nothing. So there's no connector to SharePoint. And then, of course, Power Automate has a connector to SharePoint, but it has no way to move it to S3 bucket. So now you're kind of stuck there, like, all right, well, that's able to do, is able to access file from SharePoint, even to be able to build triggers off SharePoint when a new file gets dropped or whatever. You could have it trigger off and move the do what you want it to do. But the problem is it does no good because you cannot upload it to an S3 bucket. So that's the challenge here. This is going to be tough, man, because I think right now the only option is to do it via code, right? Or find a platform, a some sort of software like Visual Crones that I use that's able to do that. I keep saying Visual Crones because that's the platform that I am using today, and it works to do this because we actually done it, right? We ran it and it worked fine to download and upload S3, so that works fine. But if cost is an issue with that, then it will be a matter of trying to find another platform, right? If maybe there's another platform that's able to do something similar to that. Which that I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if there is some sort of other platform. I mean, I'm pretty sure there is. I'm just not familiar with all the platforms that are out there either. But let me check real quick. Maybe we could find something and see what we could find. So there's this other, what is called Automate IO. Now I never used this before. I just click on the right, connect to cloud apps, automate works. So this seems to be probably identical to the Zapper, right? It's the same thing. They just probably have other connectors in place. So I'm just kind of curious. Let me go back. So they have an Amazon S3 and Microsoft SharePoint integration. Add a new content and manage documents in SharePoint. Arrange your files, folders, and content in S3 and automate workflow. Do much by connecting S3 and SharePoint. So let's see, what do they have? They have add text objects in S3 and new documents in SharePoint. I mean, it looks like when you look at the image, it's moving it from SharePoint to S3. Send emails in Microsoft. Add text objects S3 on new task in Microsoft SharePoint. What are some? What does it have when a new or updated file? So you create a trigger when something new gets added. New bucket, new document, task. Search your documents. Add a task. Search files. Add text object. Document S3 Microsoft social media. So this may be actually a cool. Let's look at the pricing real quick. How much is their pricing? So they got a free version. 5 bots, 5 minutes, 1 team, 300 actions per month. Then they have this other one. Let's give this a try, man. Let's try it out. Let me register real quick. Let me sign up. We'll give it a try to see if this kind of gives us at least that piece when it comes to downloading. Yeah, but company won't invest in any random third-party service, man. They want to stick to AWS only. So I think if they don't want to use a tool like Zapper, or like this one, but I just showed right now, Automate.io, or things of that. I don't think you can, man. Like, I mean, right now, your only option that I could think of is going to be having some code, right? You know, running. Have a script run or create a little app or something, but create your own code that's ultimately going to do the job. That's going to be able to connect and then ultimately upload it S3. Like, I don't see any options. I don't see any other abilities if you're trying to do it within AWS only, like strictly AWS services, right? Because AWS has many services, but the only service that if there was a chance to do it, would have been this guy, AppFlow. Then AppFlow does not have a connector for that. It's a MNC, so they won't go for any third party. Yeah, and I get that, right? Because I mean, there are, I have worked for companies in the past where they're trying to stick to specific services, right? Whether it be Azure or AWS, and try to stick with it. I was watching Amazon storage services tutorial. There it shows they did some VMware installation. So every time they would copy data to a folder, it automatically would reflect an S3. So I think what you're saying here, this is like a whole different question though, but you're saying here is more like the mirroring your data, right? So if you happen to have it could be a directory, right? A file system, file directory set up. If you have files that are dropped in there, that it just syncs up to an S3 bucket, and that you could do. There's some settings that will have to be configured to do that, but that's doable. But I think the main issue though here still kind of goes down to what you're trying to solve, which is how do I access my SharePoint data and upload it to an S3, bucket. The only other option I could think of that requires no connector, for example, is, let me see real quick. I'm going to try to see if I can show it without actually showing too much, I guess. So give me 1 second. Let me see what I could do. Okay, so I think this works. I think this actually works. Let me show it real quick. All right. Share my screen. The only other thing I could think of again in this case, and I actually implemented this in one of my projects that we did, was in Windows. Again, this only works for Windows, of course, not Linux or Mac, or it does work for Mac, but again, let's just stick to Windows for now. On a Windows machine, you could Just like the way you could connect your OneDrive account where all of your files are technically locally on your drive, you could connect to a SharePoint. This right here is actually a SharePoint site. I call it Development. Then of course we have documents. Then I have a folder called YouTube 2022. If I were to want to and the way it's set up right now is I could access it locally, you know, through just a norm, just like the way it fits in my just like the way I could access any local file system. So if I were to write some code, for example, or have a process where it's going to be like, hey, read data from this specific directory path, which is local, it could grab those files and then upload it to S3. And that could be done through the AWS command line interface, which literally will be one line of code, like one command, which would be grab the files from this folder, right, which would be considered locally. Even if the way it works is, even if you don't have a copy of it locally, but when you access it, it should download the newest version automatically, put it on your machine. Then of course you're able to upload that to S3 bucket. Again, that's the only other option that I could think of in ways for now to do it without, because there's no connectors as of right now. There's no connector that exists within AWS to even allow you to do anything like that. So I think when it comes to uploading if you're trying to access SharePoint data and then to upload that data over to an S3 bucket, this is probably your other option. I think is going to be this, where if you happen to have a VM, kind of going back to your VMs, right? If you have a VM running on you know on a AWS environment that's inside your network of your AWS virtual environment, well, you can have a VM running. That VM will be a Windows machine, and that account, that server would have to be connected. Like you could connect to SharePoint and kind of have your do, I think, what do they call it? Is it like quick link or something, or shortcut maybe? I don't know what it's called, but whenever you log into SharePoint, you're able to get that configured to your set up to that environment, and by doing that, you're ultimately have access to it locally. And then of course, once you're ready to view the file, it downloads the files. So it doesn't like download all the files, but it has the metadata of the files, and when you're ready to access it, it downloads it. Then of course you access it whichever way you want. That would be the only other way that I could think of to do it. Let's see, what did you say? I was watching Amazon storage with a VM. Yeah, so again, I think I did read that question already. So that is doable. I actually read about that a while back, and I was kind of reading the documentation on how to do that. There is like this mirroring process you could do. At least that's what I'm thinking, the way they did it anyways. I just haven't had a need to do it, so I never implemented it. But again, I think even with that approach, that's kind of a if you're trying to streamline everything from beginning to end, right, which is SharePoint over to S3 bucket, from S3 bucket ultimately over to Redshift, right? If that's kind of the ultimate goal, SharePoint, S3, Redshift, flow. I think you have options when it comes to AWS. Like when it comes to S3 and Redshift, like looking at it, we could use AppFlow for that, and that would work. You could move data over from S3 to Redshift, no problem. You could use AWS Glue, which gives you a little bit more flexibility in my mind to do some customizations. But if that's not needed, then AppFlow is probably the more easier approach to do it. Can you create a private group in SharePoint and see via your code if it could push to S3 still? So I think what you're saying is don't allow the user account to have access to SharePoint, right? That's what you're trying to test. If they don't have access to a specific site, can they still download the files? And then from downloading because ultimately, if you could download the files, like at least the code that I have would upload it to an S3 bucket because it would just work. Let's take a look. I think what time is it? 10 o'clock. I think we could try to do that real quick. So let me just set it up real quick though. So give me a few minutes. I do need to set the configurations on that, and let me log into my other account real quick. Let's see. Hopefully everybody's having a good day today, man. I know got a few viewers watching right now, so thanks for joining live stream. Again, I know we're kind of going over a few things that we're gonna test out. That's kind of what we do here. So, any questions that you have, we'll try to get to it as well. But that's kind of, that's the whole purpose of this. Have a little drink. I'm drinking my tequila. I think it helps me out, but again, we'll see, right? We'll see if I'm actually solving some of these problems in the next 30 minutes. Let's see. All right, let me go ahead and log in. All right, let me see. So what I'm gonna do, let me create another site, and I'm trying to think if I'm able to do it though with this account. The reason why I'm not sure, because I created an account specifically for YouTube to do all kinds of things of what we're doing now. But I only have one account, which is me only. I'm the only user there. So I don't know if I could remove myself, but let's try it out though. Let's try it out. Let me create a new account, a new site. I mean, we'll call this. Let's call this team. Team sites. All right, that's fine. Team sites, cool. Yep, private. Only members can access the site. All right, so I'm gonna make it private. Hit next. It says start typing a name to add members. All right, I don't want to add no members to it. Let me hit finish. Okay, let me go to my settings. Let's see what I could do over here relating to that. So let me see if I have access to it or not. Man, did I call it site or sites? I think I call it sites. Oh, I did call it sites. Okay. So I did remove. Let me share my screen. So I did create a new SharePoint site, but I removed access from myself. Let's take a look at it right quick. Go back. I don't know if it's because I'm a global admin, because again I am the main user here, but when I go to groups, add members, see I actually removed that group out of this account. But if I'm the admin, that's probably why, because I am the admin. Let me try to go back. I'm trying to see if I get some kind of message like, oh, you cannot access or whatever, but that's not the case. Oh, that's not what I want. So let me remove this. My sites, team development. So I know I have access to that. I don't know if this is because sometimes there's like a small delay where you gotta wait a little bit. So right now, I may not be able to test that. Either I need to again, I did remove myself. I made the site private, right? It's a private group, and I did remove myself from the site, right? So if I go back to my settings, groups, I don't have access to that, but I am the admin, so I don't know if that kind of contradicts itself, right? Type deal. That I'm not sure. But I know Microsoft sometimes does not work automatically, right? There's certain times where maybe, like I have had a contractors work for me when they leave eventually, when the project's done and they leave, and then I turn off their access, and I get a message that says, oh, it's going to take 60 minutes before things clear out. So there's like a little delay. I don't know if that's what's happening here, even though it didn't tell me it's going to take 60 minutes or nothing like that. So I say for right now, we'll wait on trying to test that out. We may not be able to test that out now, but maybe we'll test that out and then a few and see if we could get that to ultimately work or not. Just because I see what you're trying to see. Like, hey, can we make sure that we have access? Honestly, what should happen though, in theory, that should happen is if that user that you're trying to use to connect to a private SharePoint site, if you don't have access to it, that user is not going to work. Like, it's no, like if you're automating it through code to say I want to connect to this SharePoint site or this SharePoint site, it's no different than if you were to log in manually through Office365.com, right? You log in manually. And then if you don't have access to the SharePoints to begin with, that you can't see the folder, you cannot access the site. Same thing with the API. When you connect to it via API, you're not gonna have access. You're gonna get permission denied. Like, that's what should happen in those cases. Now, again, there's workarounds for that, and the workaround is more so getting either IT to give you access to it if you need it, working with IT to create a new account that is very limited on their access, but it has access to what you need. So again, if the business kind of wants to automate that, and you need access to, let's say, 3 different SharePoint sites, then again it kind of goes down to having IT create this generic account, but then have them limit their access to only those 3 sites, right? Then eventually, if you need access to more sites, IT should be able to add those additional sites, just kind of like the way I showed right now earlier, right? So again, just like no different on how I showed it. just like the way I kind of created this this other account doesn't have any license, but I created this other one. I think I did this for maybe distribution group, I believe. But just like this guy, if I would look at the groups, this guy's only part of one group, but you could always add them to other groups. So if you're dealing with like 12 different sites, it'll be a matter of just adding whatever that user is, giving them access to sites, which is number one. This is the one setting that you would do. The other setting, and this is again your admin should know how to do this in ways, would be adjusting these settings in Azure, where that specific user in Azure, it kind of gives you more flexibility. Like let me see if I could get to it real quick. Again, I am in my test account, so anything that I show should be fine. Like, yeah, I don't think it would. I'm not too concerned about showing anything that I don't want to show. Let's go to admin, and then when you go to admin section, it would be Active Directory or security. I think it will actually be under security. So once we're in this section, maybe it wasn't security. I think it was. Let me go back. I think it was Active Directory. There it goes. Now I'm in the Azure Portal. That's what I was looking for. So of course, once you're in here, you have you have additional configuration that you could do. So right now I have 2 users. Let's say if I were to click on this user, let me see, is it here? Where do I do this? So for example, like a lot of time whenever people want to know like multi-factor authentication, a lot of that could be set up in here, right? You got a per user multi-factor authentication. There's password reset, things of that nature that you could do here. But let's see what I wanted to see was, I think, the user settings. Nope, that's not it. Let me go to users. No, that's not it. Active Directory. Identity governance. I'm trying to think where is it at? I haven't done this in a while, so I'm trying to remember. And I may not have all the access either, because I am using a lighter the account that I'm using. It's not the enterprise level account. But nevertheless though, just kind of at least give you, if you have never seen this page before, this is what your admin would normally be going to kind of specify your user access or specific users access more. Most of the time they do it on a global level, so it's kind of more like generic, which is like, well, like if you're gonna do multi-factor authentication, they do it for everybody, right? All users. Or if you're gonna do, I don't know, just let's say if you're gonna add some what is it called? If you're gonna add some conditional access, like this is a big one right here that comes up a lot. I get a lot of questions for this conditional access. But you could add a conditional access either by location, VPN connection, or operating system. Like the list goes on and on. You can be very specific that says, in order to connect to SharePoint or Office, services, you have to be within the network or within this location, like this country or a specific state or something. Like they become very specific, right? Or you got to be connected to the VPN. And then if you're not connected to a VPN, or if you're not, let's say, connected to a specific location or IP address, like a network, then what you could do is build logic that says, okay, in those scenarios, you have to connect via using multi-factor authentication. So, you could add an extra layer of security that says if you're in the network, you don't need to connect via multi-factor authentication. But let's say you're out of country because you're working remote, then you're out of the location. Now you're forced to log in via multi-factor. Again, I'm not an expert at it, but I have played around with it. I have done some work with it. Your admin for sure will know all about that. At least they should, anyways. And that's how you could kind of, they'll be able to set up all of that, those accesses as needed. So again, kind of going back down, let me check if I have access to the site still. If I'm trying to, what I'm hoping is that I don't have access, because if I don't get access to it, then that tells me that they removed it from me. Like, let me check my sites, teams. Nope. See, I still have access, but I just don't know if this is because I'm the admin, and that may be the reason, or see, it shows me as the owner, and I'm a member group. I'm not sure why I am removed from group. This group has only one owner. To remove the owner of this group, first promote another owner. There you go. That's why. So maybe what I could do here is add a member. I'm going to add the dev user that I had. Dev. He's going to be an owner. Save. Now let me remove myself. Now let's see if it lets me connect to it. See, still lets me connect. Like, what the hell? I was expecting it not to let me connect, but that's not the case. Again, it could be a delay issue as well. I know Microsoft has that. It has done that before for other stuff. So I think I did everything that I need to do. But again, it could be because I'm the admin. What I may need to do, just create a whole the dev user that I have. See if I'm able to. I did add them already. I gave that dev user ownership access. Yeah, I don't know, man. I may just have to come back in a few to see if my access has been revoked or not. That I'm just not sure right now at that point. So again, I think when it comes down to what can you do when you're dealing with connecting to SharePoint and moving data over, honestly, man, I think your only two options you have if you're trying to stay within the AWS ecosystem at all costs, it's going to be having some kind of code develop, which I actually have a video that kind of has that already in place. So that's one option. The other option is going to be to do kind of what I mentioned earlier with the folder, which would be you would have to have a VM set up, some kind of another server set up. It would have to be Windows, like a Windows server set up, running. Doesn't need a lot of resources, very small resources, but have that set up. And then ultimately from there, you would have to connect your SharePoint. Like there's an option. Maybe let me see if I could bring it up real quick just to at least show you. So for example, if I were to go to documents, see how we have this sync button, or you have this add shortcut to OneDrive. So if you were to do something like this, then ultimately what it does, it ends up adding it to your file explorer, and then from here you could access it just like the way you access any local document. So if you were to do something like this, then ultimately what it means, what you could do potentially, this is again kind of not using code, but the only thing you would have to use would be the AWS command line interface. Would be write a command that would ultimately pick up all the files in whatever folder you're trying to get, right? Let's say 2022. It'll pick up all of these folders. You could add a wildcard to only specify a specific folder that way you want. Then it would take those files and upload it to an S3 bucket. Like, so those are, honestly, I think those are the only two options you have. Either use Python code or another language, but let's just say Python for now code to connect to SharePoint and upload an S3 bucket, or um, create a VM, have that VM set up in your AWS environment. That VM would then needs to be connected to your SharePoint site, which is kind of what I did here. And then once you do that, you could access the files in SharePoint just like a normal local directory file that you have. And of course, then by that being said, that's where you could use command line interface to point to the specific folder, and then you could have it run every whatever, right? Every once a day, whatever, how many times you want it to run. And then that would mean that when it runs, it'll pick up all of those files, then upload it to the S3 bucket. And then of course from there you have options, right? You know, we saw with AppFlow that you could create an AppFlow that would upload your data directly to Redshift from S3 to Redshift, or you could use AWS Glue. So just kind of your choice. Can you show VM connection next time from SharePoint to S3? So the VM connection, it's not really a VM connection, but it's just creating a virtual machine that will have to be Windows that would be running AWS command line interface. So, which I kind of have already. So I know I showed a while back. I think it was like a week or two ago, and I could connect to it right now. But I have a server running right now, which is this guy. So I'm connecting to it now. Let's see. So I have a server. So my server that I'm using for Visual Crohn's, this server lives on AWS, in the AWS environment that I have, right? That's kind of where it lives at. And I have AWS running on this server. And kind of what we did, like if I were to go back and find the code the job, better yet, that we're messing with, which would have been this guy here. There you go, this guy, right? The upload files to AWS S3. So if we take a look at this guy, it's kind of hard to see because it's kind of small. So I guess let me make it a little bit bigger. By the hell, guys, cancel. Let me make this bigger so you kind of see a little bit clearer. So what this is doing, right? It's doing the same concept. It's looking at a specific folder, which the only thing that I mentioned different was. Let me check real quick. So the only thing that I mentioned here was if you were to, like, I guess technically I could do it here. I just don't really want to install that. You do have to install, I believe, the OneDrive like on your machine. But if I were to clone, like sync my SharePoint to my OS, what happens is you'll see a folder pop up here in the quick links that would be for that SharePoint site. And then of course from there, it looks like a normal directory. Just like the way, here, let me fix this. Which will look just like this, right? This is actually a SharePoint site, but when I look at the URL, it's pointing to my local machine. And then of course I have a folder in there for which will be like the company name, then SharePoint site, then documents, and then of course your subfolders and so on. So that will be the same concept. Once it's there, it's technically local now, and that's kind of what would happen over here. So this would actually be that local folder that really it's syncing to your SharePoint site. That's what it is. And then of course everything after that would be the same. Like this will be no different. It'll be your S3 bucket. The name. The like the subfolder, and then this is another subfolder. And then of course, we're doing a recursion because we want to reload all the files. Then of course we only want to include file that contain the word farmers market. So you could add any kind of other wildcard if you have different kind of files in there, or you have multiple files that you want to send to different folders or different buckets, right? So that's all part of the the ability to do that. But this, so this right here, what we did, we ran this code, but we ran it using visual crones. You don't have to use visual crones. The what I want to call the cheap way to do it would be use task scheduler, which is free. It's already included in Windows. And then of course you would just literally create a task. And then inside this task, it's going to be running literally this command that I have here, and it'll do the same thing. Then of course that in task scheduler, you could have that run once a day, every 4 hours, whatever it is that you want it to run, right? So from a cost perspective, it's the only thing you're paying for is for the VM. But again, you don't need crazy resources. You probably need at least 4 gigs, I will say, at least, just because Windows is not like Linux. You can run to my experience with very little RAM, and of course Windows is it frees it up if you run less than 4. So, but that's really your only cost, and from there it will be literally a matter of, again, you got 2 options. You could have a VM that's running your Python code. And if you were to do that, you could same thing, use a task scheduler, do create task, and then of course you would just create your you would have the action call your Python script, and of course your Python script do what it needs to do. So that's option number 1. Option number 2 would be same concept. We're still going to use task scheduler, but instead of calling the Python script, it's going to end up calling the AWS command line interface, and it's going to run this command that we have here. And this would ultimately do the same thing, which is going to take the files from that specific folder and then upload it over to SharePoint. The only thing that I'm saying different on option 2 is this guy right here. This directory path would actually be part of your SharePoint sync folder, right? Which means if you create a VM, you would have to log on to your browser, and then when you log into your browser and you log in, you're gonna do a connect to, like, sync to OneDrive option that you see in the browser. Let me just kind of show it real quick. It'll be like add a shortcut, add a shortcut to OneDrive. By you doing that, it's gonna add that on your File Explorer, which means now you have think of it like a local copy it's being synced to SharePoint. So as new files are dropped into SharePoint, they will get synced to your VM, as well. And then all you're doing is you don't even have to connect to SharePoint no more. All you have to do is just connect, access your local directory, which is already synced to SharePoint automatically. And then that's how you could get any new files and be able to process it, right, to ultimately kind of do what you're trying to do in this case, right? Take files from SharePoint and send it over to S3. So, I mean, I think as of right now, based on what some of the limitations that you have, which you don't want to use third parties, none of that, I think your best option is going to be that. And here's the thing about it. We just saw a lot of these third parties don't even have connectors to even do that, like completely, right? They may have a connector to S3, but they don't have one for OneDrive. Not OneDrive, SharePoint. Or they have one for SharePoint, but not for OneDrive. Or, again, so, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is probably your best option, to be honest with you. I'll try to see what I could do on setting up a VM, and we kind of go through the process. But ultimately, kind of what I just showed you right now is kind of what it would be. Like this, what I'm showing you here, this is actually a server that I have that lives under AWS. And then of course, it will. The only thing that I haven't done here is, of course, under my. I have not done a sync SharePoint like the to my local my machine. Because if I would have done that, then you'll see a little shortcut here for that specific site, which means that I'll be able to access all of my files from SharePoint. But that's ultimately what it does, right? Once you do that, you will call it no different. This will be the same thing. You're just calling that specific folder that that ultimately syncs to your SharePoint, and then everything else is the same. Same concept, right? You can pull wildcards if you're looking for specific file names. It's really up to you, but that's the same concept, right? And both option 1 or 2, they're not gonna be like expensive to do. The only thing I would say with option 1 though is you could technically run option 1 is using, let's say, Python code that connects to SharePoint and then ultimately upload the S3. You could run that on any machine. It doesn't have to be a VM that lives under your AWS environment. You could run that in a local corporate machine or something, a server that maybe exists on-prem, or some kind of just random PC that nobody's using at work or something, right? You could run that anywhere. But for option 2, which is syncing the SharePoint to that machine, I mean, technically you could run that at any machine too, but that one probably makes more sense to create a VM, have that VM be connected to SharePoint, like sync with SharePoint, and then of course, from there use AWS command line interface to push up a lot of your files from the VM over to an S3 bucket. So I think when it comes down to it, man, those are really your only options that I could think of that you have right now. And it's not that we don't have other options, we do, but I think what it sounds like your company has some restrictions, right, on what, like they may not want to use third party applications, or then maybe they don't want to spend, and I get it, it makes sense too, right? So I understand too, but they may not want to spend the money either for like a visual Crohn's or something other that's similar to that, because it's not cheap either. So that being said, I think really these two are probably your main options. And the two options that I mentioned, they work for sure, because I have done it already. So they do work for sure. But yeah, I think that's gonna be what you have to deal with. Let's see, everyone having same requirements. Yeah, I mean it's the one thing I would say is I would keep an eye on AppFlow and see what updates they make to it, because AppFlow is still pretty new, of course, right? It's not something that hasn't been out as long. I would hope that they add more connectors, because in my mind, if they're able to add more connectors to it, then like, especially let's say they add a 1-day SharePoint, dude. If they do that, then that solves all your problems. Because then not just you, because there's pretty sure other people having the same issues as well. So, what do you say? Please open this link. Which link? Are you sending me a link or? What link are you talking about? I'm not sure. I don't. Are you referring to a link that I have, or a link that you're gonna send me? Because I haven't received the link. If that's the case. But again, when it comes to Power Automate, my bad, Power Automate. What am I talking about? AppFlow. I would hope that they come out with more as time goes on, right? I mean, I get they put some of the big applications, Salesforce, Slack, but you could tell there's no Microsoft products, right? There's no Microsoft Teams, there's no OneDrive, there's no Sharepoint, and again, a lot of it could be because of that's their competition. So let's see, what do they have? They have Redshift, Honeycode, analytics, Infor. This is actually interesting. I didn't know they had one. They're actually pretty big. Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow is big as well. Snowflake, so that's interesting. I don't know they had that as well. Okay, and then Slack. But again, hopefully over time they add more register new connector. So this is interesting. Please make sure you add source-based policies so the AppFlow can invoke the function when executing flow in your custom connector. So this is kind of interesting. I guess it has where you kind of create your own connectors as well. So that's pretty interesting. I don't know what that entails. It may be it's one of those projects that may entail, it may require a decent amount of work, but nevertheless, that probably could be an option, right? If it does allow you to use Lambda to create your own function ultimately, and that function would be, I guess we have to follow the AppFlow SDK. Building custom connectors using Amazon Flow. Building custom connectors. Let's see. The custom connector software development kit is now makes it easier to integrate with private API endpoints, proprietary applications, or other cloud services. It provides access to all available, managed, integrated, blah, blah, blah. The SDK is open on Java and Python. Private share, public. So, I mean, this is more if you have your own application, I'm assuming. I don't know if this works on creating for another application, right? Like creating a connector for SharePoint or something like that. But this is interesting. I may need to look into this, read into the documents a little bit. Yeah, so this is interesting. Again, I may read over this over the weekend, but so you could create your own connectors as well for AppFlow, which again, I guess that would be ideal if you have your own application and you're trying to build a connector where you're taking data from here and loading it to your application, for example, which that makes perfect sense. As well, but I wonder. Yeah, I don't know. I need to read into it some more, but that's pretty interesting. I think you had another question. Let me read your email real quick. What was the other one? So we talked about storage, about automatically. You asked about S3 bucket, also automatically. Again, I think there is a process for that. I know I read into that a while back. I never had a reason to implement it, but ultimately, based on what I was reading, it's kind of like having a network um, in AWS, for example. Where's my AWS at? Let me close out of this. I don't have any EC2 instances on this account, but it would be having a new volume created. And ultimately, that volume, you could connect it to different OSs or multiple OSs so they could all share. But within the operating system, there's a setup that you could do. No, my bad. No, I'm not getting. No, the last message I got is please open this link. That's all I got. Haven't got any other message after that. Link sent in chat 5 times. No, I'm not getting any. I wonder if the chat is rejecting the link. Maybe it doesn't allow you to send the link. You can try emailing to me. I guess that's probably the for sure way for me to get it. But yeah, no, I have not received any link through the chat. So one thing I am going to play around with a little bit more is going to be the damn, where did it go? There it goes. The AppFlow. I think AppFlow is pretty interesting because I do a lot of stuff anyways related to S3 to Redshift, and it's right now I use AWS Glue, and for the stuff that I do is pretty straightforward. For the most half, it's like I want to take the data as is. Okay, I have emailed it. All right, let me check. Yep, I got it. Power Automate. All right, copy a file from Sharepoint AWS Bucket. We have requirements to copy a file. We want to schedule this to run daily. Okay, anyone have any ideas? I found some posts that have to use SFTP. We have the same requirements. So I guess a lot of people are trying to do the same thing. So AWS Transfer Family. So this is more like a setup for SFTP. We could use Power Automate to FTP files to S3. I wrote a blog about AWS Family. Let me see what else. Thank you. I'm aware of AWS. Yeah, so I'm aware of that too. But I'm a beginner in SharePoint. How to use Power Automate to achieve this. SharePoint, does they have a connector to transfer files? Transfer Family allows you to FTP files to S3. You can use Power Automate to FTP files via the FTP connector. If I have answered your questions, please mark my post. I configure SFTP server using AWS Transfer Family. If this is a public server, I'm able to. So I think what they're saying here is, so the AWS Transfer Family pretty much is supposed to be a FTP setup. That's kind of what it is, right? FTP has been around for years. That's nothing new. You could get that anywhere else. You could set up your own one if you want. It's very easy to do. I've actually done it a few times. But this is just more to if you want to use use an AWS service for this. So I think what they're saying here is, and let's go to it, AWS transfer family. So pretty much this is more of a set up an FTP pretty much in the AWS environment, right? In the ecosystem of AWS. Now, once you set that up, because it's a normal FTP or SFTP, like any other one, Power Automate has the ability to say, hey, pull file from SharePoint and send them over to an FTP site. So if I were to go to the connectors, right, I'm pretty sure if I were to do FTP, we'll find a connector here for that. And there you go. We have a few connectors. So let's see if we have one. Create a file on FTP when a SharePoint file is created. So that's one option of a trigger. But I'm pretty sure we will be able to find a connector here that gives us the SharePoint to FTP. So we know that's doable through Power Automate. Now, because this FTP happens to be an AWS service, again, part of their transfer family, I think what the guy was saying in the article, there's triggering abilities where you could have data go from the FTP over to an S3 bucket. So let's see. AWS transfer families makes sense. Support transferring data from or to another AWS service account. Okay, so it supports transferring data, makes sense. S3 bucket, network file system. Let's see. Create an AWS bucket. Let's see. Manage workflow. Manage your server security. Set up endpoint, sign in, create a bucket. AWS family accesses your AWS bucket to service your user transfer requests. So you need to provide an S3 bucket as part of the setup. Your file transfer protocol enable your server. You can use an existing bucket or create one. You don't when you set up a user access point, AWS transfer family supports AWS access, blah blah blah. So let's let me go back to this. So the cost seems to be 30 cents per protocol per hour. So let's say we were to do FTP, right? Very basic, straightforward. Don't have to deal with these other, keys or anything. So let's just do that real quick. So I'm gonna do next. Let's see. Service manager, create a manager service, AWS server directory, custom identity provider, manage user by integrating identity, your choice, Lambda, nope. So let's do service. To use this service, manage authentication, disable FTP and FTP in step 1 or select Alright, let me go back. Select the protocol you want to enable. Disable FTPS and select AWS directory service of your own identity. Let's see. Enable users in AWS Managed AD or use your own self-managed AD in your own on-prem environment. Let's do custom, I guess. Custom would be AWS function. Invoke AWS Lambda function to call your identity provider API for user authentication. No, that's not what I want either. I don't want that. So I guess it wants us to use SFTPS, which is fine as well. So ultimately, we're probably going to get some sort of secret key for that. Private key, I mean. VPC hosted, access control user security group, endpoint type. Select whether the endpoint will be publicly accessed or hosted in your VPC. So the thing about this is because you're going to need it to be publicly accessed because you're going to have, let's say, Power Automate, which is a whole different service accessing this SFTP connection. So this will have to be publicly accessed for that case. Custom host name, specify a name. Use the default server, that's fine. None. Select whether the endpoint should compile offender, blah blah blah. That's fine. Let's see. Choose an AWS service to store and access your data over the selected protocol. There you go. So we're gonna pick S3 bucket then. So we need a login row. AWS row for the server to push events over. I don't have one created. Or do I have one? AWS service row for support. I do have one. I guess this one probably should work. Let's see. Security policy. So this is pretty much just creating a new one. No, it's not. Oh man, did I create this one? That's fine. We'll use that. Server host key. Optional private key. Upload. This is if I want to upload my own. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave it blank. So it's probably, you can ignore this section unless you are migrating users from an existing, which I'm not. I'm creating a new one, so it should create one for me. Should get one set up. Workflow, set the workflow that AWS Transfer Family should run on all files after they are uploaded via the server. So I'm not sure what options we have. So I'll leave, let me, I guess, open this up in a new window real quick. What steps? Copy files, copy incoming files to a different location, tag file, custom file processing. So you could have it invoke some kind of lambda function or delete. We're going to leave that blank for now because the main goal is we just want to get it to an S3 bucket. But right now we have it connected to an S3 bucket, which means it should automatically get uploaded to that. So let me go back to this. I'm going to leave that blank. Display banner. I don't need a display banner. That's fine. Hit next. Create server. So this may take a minute or two. But ultimately, what it should be doing is creating a server that's going to be running, because this has to run at all times. You know, SFTP sites and stuff, they run all the time. So let that create. While that's creating, let me go back to Power Automate. So in Power Automate, SFTP. What the hell? SF. There it goes. TP. No triggers is an event. There are currently no triggers for this connection. So SF. Let's try this guy. SSH. When a file is added or modified. So let me just create a new one. Let me create SFTP. All right, so this is our connection for SFTP. Let me see if this is done. Nope, it's still starting, so gotta wait on that. So add user that's unique within the server. I am Lou SFTP. Let's call it that for now. That's fine. So I don't have a row. We may have to create a row as well for that. So protocol, I don't think it allowed me to change it to FTP. FTP or cannot be enabled on servers using service managed authentication mode. To enable, you need to configure your endpoint to use a custom identity provider using an API gateway URL or invoking blah blah blah. So I don't want to do that. So here's our endpoint. Let's see what else. Right now I show that I have no users added. So I think for the users, I don't have a row, AWS service row for support, blah blah blah. I don't have a row created. Normally it gives an option to create a row, but it's not. Let's see, policies, auto generate policies based on home folder. What is this? An optional IAM scope, blah blah blah. I'm gonna select none. So I'm assuming this is the home directory that is gonna be. So I think what it is, this is where I want to kind of confirm though that's the case. But if I were to go to S3. This is the bucket. Alright, there's no files in here, that's fine. Leave that blank. Restricted. Let's see, when a home directory is set to restricted, your user will not be able to access anything outside of that folder, nor will they be able to see the S3 bucket or folder name. That's fine, leave it blank, leave it unchecked. Publicly to learn how to generate an SSH key pair for each user, click here. So this we will need. So I think this may be an option, but there's a few things that we would have to get set up as well. Now that I'm kind of going through it and looking at it, I think the way this works is So we created an SFTP site. The difference, I'm not sure you're familiar with it, but FTP and SFTP, pretty much one is not secure. All it takes is username, password, and all of the data is transferred over unencrypted. So that's why it's not secure. While the SFTP is secure, it does require a public key to be able to connect to it. So again, if I go back to my Power Automate, there will be a section here for, there you go, private key that I will have to provide. And then if there happens to be any paraphrase and things of that nature, so all of that will have to be entered in, as well as username and password. So it just kind of adds another level again of security. And then of course it is encrypted as data gets transmitted from point A to point B. So that's really the only difference, right? So think of it as secure, not secure. The way we have it set up is an SFTP. Now, the way I'm looking at it, I never used this before. I looked into it, but I never used it. But the way I'm reading it is, I think the way it works is once you set up your service, which right now it's a service that's running, so it's probably some kind of VM that's running. The way they got it set up is we have to create users. As we create users, so let's say we create user A and user B, each user would as they upload files, I guess, or access files, whatever it may be, it would connect to a specific bucket, an S3 bucket, right? So like user A may have access to bucket A, and user B would have access to bucket B, and so on. Which means if they log in and if they drop files in there, I think what should happen, it would automatically sync those files over to the S3 bucket. And same thing if they're trying to download files. So I guess kind of going back, this is now that I'm looking at it, I think this is the third option that actually would work. Once we get this set up, and I need to create a user, but in order to do that, I'm gonna have to create a row as well, then create a user, and then do all of that. Let me play around with it. I'll play around with it a little bit, probably over the weekend, and we could probably go over it on Tuesday's session if you want, or whenever you come, or Friday, whenever you're on. But I think that this would work, man. Like the more that I'm thinking of it and reading, I think this would actually work, because what it's going to do is, think of it as this is no different than any normal SFTP connection. The difference is the username that you're using to connect to it is linked behind the scenes to an S3 bucket. So as you upload files under that user, what should happen, it should automatically sync and drop it to an S3 bucket, right? That's kind of what it's doing, right? It's kind of like it's connected to an S3 bucket behind the scenes. And then of course, which means if that works, then we could use Power Automate, I think, to be able to connect to Sharepoint, take the files and drop it to this SFTP under that specific user that is linked to that specific S3 bucket, and that'll get your files moved over there. So I think it works, man. Again, I gotta piece everything together, and we'll test it out and run it and make sure it works. But based on what I'm seeing, man, I think it will work, man. I think it is gonna work. So hey, I learned something new today. So that's very interesting, man, if it does work. And for me, it's interesting because I deal with S3 a lot. I have processes where I'm moving files from from server to S3, from S3 to another server, or on top of that, I even have I do hosting of FTP sites for one of my clients, and for every one of their clients, they need logins. So ultimately, I create logins, which happens to be Windows accounts, but it's part of an FTP group, and so they have access to specific folders on the server, because that's all they could access. I was already thinking of either migrating that to another server. I may look into this to see if this may be a good option. And ultimately what it would mean is, like, as I create new users, ultimately it just represents either a new S3 bucket or one bucket with subfolders, and they will just have access to that specific subfolder. So either way, I'm gonna play around with it. But man, this is again, I learned something new. So, and I think this is actually gonna work. So, and if it does work, man, that's good for you, because that's kind of what you were trying to do, right? In this case, you would use a Power Automate. Ultimately, if it works, to download from S3 from SharePoint to S3. Once it's in S3, all of that I think will be easy. You got options, right? I think once we have the process of download from SharePoint to S3, from there you could either use Power Flow to create a job that takes it from S3 to Redshift. You could use AWS Glue to do it. You could use Lambda as well to create a Lambda function that is looking for a file, and then ultimately it'll call the AWS Glue job or something. Again, we have a lot of options, so I'm not concerned about that piece. It's just more so getting it over to S3 first. Then from there, I think, yeah, we'll be able to get it, do the rest. Yeah, man, I think that sounds good. Let's test it out Tuesday. I'll do some playing around with it as well, probably from now to then, and then we'll play around with it some more on Tuesday and try to get it tested out and see if it works. So I think we're getting close, man. I think we're finding some solutions that will work. So I mean, we got solutions that works, but at least we're finding other options as well that would work as well. So that's good to know. What time is it? 11:16. So, all right, guys. I mean, I think that's it, man. That's it for today. I think it was a good live stream, man. I mean, again, I learned something new, and I don't know, man. I like learning new things. So this was, for me, this was exciting, right? So I had fun. So I will be on Tuesday. Again, on Tuesdays, I live stream at 8:15 to probably around 10:30 or so. So again, that's Tuesdays 8:15 Central to around 10:30. Then of course I'll be on Fridays from 9 p.m. to around 11ish. So again, guys, man, thanks for joining the live stream. Always fun, always fun learning new things. I had fun. Again, drinking my tequila. So man, can't complain about that. So appreciate